Rob Vischer. Welcome to my storytelling podcast, God Out Loud. With every new episode, you'll hear stories of people who claim they heard God. Today, you'll hear from Cole Gorman, a creative who claims God told him, put down your camera and pick up a mop. That's a paraphrase. If you want to hear more God Out Loud stories, hit follow or subscribe now.
Wait. Before we do anything, can we pray? Is that okay?
Yeah, I would love that. This is Cole Gorman. He's a 6'3" athletic guy with an unforced smile, confident posture, and a full head of hair. It's not just that I've secretly wished for hair like his. I've heard other people wish for hair like his. People like my wife. Along with his enviably gorgeous locks, he's also an extremely creative artist who draws, designs, and wears iconic sneakers from the late 90s/early 2000s. Anyway, when it comes to leaving a good first impression, he doesn't have to try. He just does. And although he leverages his charisma now for things like reminding me to pray before his interview, it didn't always used to be so clear-cut. Here's Zach Taylor, one of his best friends from college, to explain.
So I met Cole at Elon University. We met in an orientation, and then in classic Cole fashion, we became immediate friends. Cole is an artist. I remember he earned a little bit of side income just among friends, painting beer pong tables with cartoon drawings of women.
I mean, my story was ridiculous. I was dating multiple women, like steeped in sexual sin. I graduated from Elon University and landed in Durham, North Carolina, unemployed at the time. So I had no job. And I had two friends from college who had moved into this place. Their third roommate was leaving and they had a vacancy. They were like, Cole, why don't you just move in? You can pay whatever you can pay until you get a job.
He's just such a good friend. It's just not a question. He's a good time and leaves us better. Yeah, we're going to do that. So I don't think there was a moment's hesitation in making that happen for him.
Within the first week of being there, I had this encounter. I was alone in my room, unpacking my boxes, didn't have anywhere to go. All my roommates were at their well-paying, high-paying jobs. And I was like, man, I got nothing. And the Lord met me there. His presence entered the room and I felt the weight of my sin on my own shoulders. And after just breaking and weeping, I heard him say, you're mine now. Nothing's going to take you. You're mine now.
Cole says he encountered God in that moment for the first time in his life. Even though Cole's eardrums did not detect an audible voice, he knew/felt/heard with his whole being God speaking actual words to him.
You're mine now. I was like, okay, I'm yours now. So I go to my computer and I Google what's the nearest church. And the Summit Church is within walking distance of where I was living. And quite literally a mile from my apartment. So went there, a couple years go by and I meet Ashley.
He remembers meeting me at church. I think I was singing at one of the campuses of the church that we went to. He says that I look like somebody from his college, and he was trying to figure out if I was her. He says he remembers me coming down from singing after the service and introducing himself. He extended his arm and introduced himself. Hey, I'm Cole. Are you so-and-so from Elon? And I looked him dead in the face and just said nope and turned around. And walked a different direction. I have no recollection of that.
Well, so much for Cole leaving a memorable first impression.
I remember around Halloween, I had a common friend coax me out of just staying at home one night. And she was like, come on, there's a party at this guy Cole's house. And I was like, I don't know. There might be a bunch of people there. I don't know. She was like, I think some seminary people you might know would be there. So you should just come. Just get out of the house. And I was like, fine. I put on a Gamecock jersey because I have that in my closet. And I get some mascara and I just put the lines on my face to make it look like I at least half tried, but I really didn't care. And everybody's in Halloween costumes and he's one of the chipmunks, the tall one, I think Simon. And he's wearing a very, very, very long blue shirt, which Simon would wear. And I just remember thinking, where did you get a shirt that long? Because he's already he's 6'3". And then he welcomes me and then he's like, wow, you didn't think much about your costume at all.
Ashley didn't think much about her costume that night or about Cole after that night. But then something changed.
It was 2011. Ashley and I had kind of been running in this same friend group for about 9 months. And I was stiff arming relationships at the time because of my past sexual sin and just multiple relationships all happening at the same time. I was like, God, I might not be cut out for a monogamous relationship. And I had a group of men that were in my life that were sowing deeply into my character. Like, this is what it looks like to serve a woman. The other thing is I didn't know what it was like for God to sit at the altar in my heart of like, it was just about him. So I was like, Lord, I'm going to give you a year. I did the whole like, I'm going to be single for a year thing.
In college, Cole was magnetic, the life of the party, and a great friend. But in the course of only a couple years, he changed drastically. He was still magnetic in the life of the party and a great friend, but he wasn't the same guy. And everyone seemed to notice. Here's Zach.
Friends from college that knew both of us in our before Christ days asked me, hey, like, what's going on with Cole?
So I was at the 9-month mark. Ashley and I had been running the same friend circles, and it was Cinco de Mayo. I don't know, something about it. I didn't have any tequila. Can't blame it on that. But we were at the same end of the table and just got into like a deep theological conversation. I don't remember what it was about.
It was something about if the church isn't doing what the church is called to do, is it still a church? And I want to say the like example somebody gives is if a can opener can't open a can, is it a can opener? I'm trying to parallel that to the church. What I remember is Cole having a really thoughtful response. He wasn't proud or anything. It's not like he was trying to communicate that he was like the smartest guy in the room, but it was very authentic and genuine and present. There was a very clear difference between like the guy at the Halloween party and the guy at this table. And so my head turned a little bit. I was kind of like, okay, you're not just like the attractive guy I see at the party sometime. You genuinely want to walk with Jesus. And that's going to be a problem for me because that makes you 20 times more attractive. I'm pretty sure we probably just like locked eyes and dominated the conversation at that point. So whoever you were at that table, I'm really sorry. I'm sorry for however that conversation happened. But after that, it turned into a lot of text messages.
So for the next 2 weeks, I had her phone number and I was like cowardly texting her the whole time, like flirting. And it was just foolish. I was like, no, I really like this girl, but it's only been 9 months of singleness. I got to make it 12 months.
There's this like 2-week time period where we just text a lot. And I'm kind of wrestling with that because I kept getting myself in ditches with text messaging with dudes because I would text and text and text. And then you get in that weird place where you're kind of like, we're doing these like all day long text messages. Are we something? Are we not something? Why am I talking to you all day? And then you have to backpedal if you actually don't want to date because eventually they're going to meet somebody they want to date. And then it's like, well, we can't talk all day long. Do we just like text less and less and less until it's gone? Do we just ghost each other? Like, what do we do? One of the convictions I had built was I'm not going to talk to guys all day long on my phone and act like that's a worthy way to get to know somebody. If you're like asking what my address is for you to come pick me up, then sure, I'll text message you. But I'm not going to just do the whole relationship on text. As you can imagine, the 2 weeks of text messaging right after Cinco de Mayo, I was like, I don't want to do this. I mean, I do because I'm really into you, but if you want to get to know me, you can get in my world. After like a week of texting nonstop, I eventually said, hey, I actually should have told you this from the get-go. Like, I'm not just going to text you all day long. But I was like, I will do a 5 text message rule. So I tell him this, and he, clever man that he is, he was like, okay, so is that like 5 texts per day? Or is that like 5 texts per conversation?
Back in the good old days of 2011, texting was different. And at that time, it was changing rapidly. In the span of a few years, most people went from texting extremely short messages with buttons on a pixelated screen to texting paragraphic messages with autocorrect on a smooth smartphone. Cole had a smooth smartphone, and he was using it to his advantage.
This is right around the time, like, you can actually send really long text messages through iMessage, and it's just one text message. It's like you can write a whole paragraph and one bubble. 5 of those is actually like a lot. So he's like using all of this to his advantage where he's like, oh, so I can write you like an email length's worth of information in one bubble. And that counts just as one text message. So he's like trying to like navigate around the rule, you know? And he's like, does that mean like in a 24-hour period? And we would joke around about it. But eventually I was like, you get the heart of what I'm saying. And I'm talking with my friend and she and I are living in this house together. I tell her, hey, I'm not down with the direction this thing's going and I need your help and accountability. Like, what do you think we should do? And so we thought about it, and it was somewhere in Proverbs, I think it might be Proverbs 20, where it says the heart of the king is in the hand of the Lord and he can direct it like a water course wherever he wishes or something like that. And I remember thinking like, Cole's heart is in the hand of the Lord and he's going to direct it however he wants.
I felt the Lord being like, yo, this isn't okay. Let's talk about this. Come and let's pray about Ashley. So I went in my room. I started journaling and praying. And I remember getting to the core fear of why I was texting her and not just like calling her up and asking her on a date. It was that moment that I feel like all men probably have where you realize that you are not sufficient to be with this woman. Like you are out kicking your coverage, right? She's so far above your league. I remember writing, Lord, I'm not man enough to lead her as a husband. And I remember him responding, you're right. You're not man enough to lead her, but I am. And I will. And again, same room that I came to Christ in, I'm there weeping again, having felt his presence and his response.
So I remember praying with her and we prayed that verse together. Lord, this is in your hand. Both of our hearts are in your hand and you can direct them like a water course wherever you want. And if that's where you want to lead it, great. And if it's not, I'm not going to violate a conviction that you built in me. I was like, I know this is crazy, but I'm going to pray for a few things. One, if we are supposed to like get to know each other in ways, I want him to, one, call me and ask me on a date. Two, I want him to address what we've been doing for the past week and a half because we weren't going to healthy places in those text messages. Like we just weren't. So he has to own that. Then three, I need to know that there's like other dudes in his life or mentors that know he's like texting women at all hours of the night. So anyway, I'm praying for all three of those things in the next 24 hours or I'm out. And within an hour, he calls. And I like show my phone to my friend. I'm like holding it up in front of her face. And I'm like, I don't know. She's like, answer it. So I answer and he's like, hey, Ashley, it's Cole. And I'm like, yeah, I know. Like we've been texting each other. Your name shows up on my phone, and he's like, yeah, first of all, I just want to say I shouldn't be blowing you up day and night, getting into personal information with you over text message. That's just not an adult way to date somebody. Like, I don't want to be a 17-year-old kid. I want to ask your forgiveness. Somebody that's genuinely interested in you should get to know you the right ways. I'm not going to do that anymore. And I'm really sorry. And I was like, check. And I really want to compromise here because that's a great check. There's two more, but maybe I can sacrifice him because he seems great. But then I'm like, nope, I'm holding my ground. So I just kind of stay silent and let him ramble. In my heart, I'm like so happy, but I'm cool as a cucumber on the phone. And he's like, also, I just want to share why I hadn't asked you on a date already. I've been working through some not great parts of my history with some guys at our church. They've been helping me towards treating women better. And I had to unlearn a lot of things. And so I didn't think I had learned enough. I didn't know if I was ready, if I was spiritual enough, if I was smart enough. I just had a lot of fear because I know you really care about theology. You love your Bible. You're in ministry. You're already doing so much for the Lord, blah, blah, blah. I was really insecure. And so I kind of was just hiding out for a little bit. But what I really needed to do was go to the guys in my life and say like, hey, do you genuinely think I'm ready? Because I really don't want to make the mistakes with women I've made in the past. I've done terrible things and I don't want to do them again. And I was like, check. And he was like, so all of that to say, instead of text messaging you, I would like to ask you on a date. What are you doing Tuesday night? I was like, yeah, I think that'll work.
Let's review the timeline real quick. Ashley prays for God to guide Cole's heart. At the same time, Cole feels like something isn't right about texting her, so he prays. While he's praying, Ashley is asking for 3 specific checkboxes to be checked, or she's out. Within less than an hour of her prayer, Cole feels like God addresses his fears of not being man enough, and he calls Ashley and proceeds to hit every one of the 3 major checkboxes she prayed for. Later that week, he picks Ashley up, drives her to Raleigh, North Carolina, and eats at a burger joint called the Raleigh Times. The date goes so well, they decide to keep talking. But instead of going back to Durham to one of their apartments, Ashley calls in a favor and commandeers elevator codes from a friend to take Cole to the rooftop of the West, a building in Raleigh, North Carolina. And exactly 1 year later, Cole blindfolded Ashley and took her back up the same elevator to the same rooftop.
I thought this is a really sweet thing he's just doing for our anniversary until he breaks out this card He had drawn a picture on one side of it that was really sweet, meaningful. And then on the other side, he had written a letter. Now, we had written each other letters before. So again, I'm thinking, this is a sweet letter for our anniversary, until he starts reading the letter. By the very end of the letter, he gets down on one knee and
I asked her to marry me. That was it. Game over, man.
And then after that, he went to the Raleigh Times, which is this like burger joint that we had been on our first date, and all of our friends were there.
I remember a pretty large group of people just being extremely excited, just saying, like, man, look what God did. Look what he's doing. Look at the people celebrating this. Look at this absolute goon that the Lord has just captured and paired with a rock star.
Not too long after, in a storybook wedding that included red Gerber daisies, red suspenders, and red Vans sneakers, the goon and the rock star married. But that's not the end of their story. Not even close. To review, Cole claims he's heard God speak twice now. One instance led him to give up past sexual sin and follow Jesus. The second ended up helping him land his first date with his now wife, Ashley. But the third time he heard God speak, even Ashley thought he might be taking things with God a bit too far. You'll hear more about it after this short break. This ad is not paid for by anybody. I'm giving it away in response to a friend whose unexpected generosity helped relaunch God Out Loud. He doesn't know I'm running an ad for his construction company, but his company, Bard Construction, deserves it. Not just because they've shown generosity to me, but because they consistently show detailed attention to the customers they serve and the homes they create. The homes they build are like instruments. They're beautiful and durable. If you want your custom home to feel more like a commissioned painting than a mass-produced poster, go to bardconstruction.com to learn more. That's BARD construction.com. They're excellent craftsmen and honest people who believe in things like short contracts and lifelong relationships. Again, go find them at bardconstruction.com. Back to the newlyweds. Ashley and Cole got married, and after their honeymoon, they jumped back into life, work, and church. Except now, they're a team.
We had our big friend group.
We're banding together for Jesus, and we're going to change the world.
I started my photography company there, photography studio.
So we were like, sure, let's start a new business. Whatever, we'll figure it out.
I was a wedding photographer, local wedding photographer.
For a season, I was Cole's second shooter. He trained me in photography.
Ashley and I felt called to fostering children.
And this was our first experience parenting.
We were both leaders at the summit, small group leaders.
And I'm also going to lead a D group, and I'm also going to teach at our church. I'm going to do like biblical literacy classes, and I would teach one on Wednesday morning and Wednesday night.
There were people over at our house almost every night of the week.
We both felt a call to ministry. It was great, and there was a lot of like energy behind that.
My photography studio was at least known in the city and in the region.
More business than he knows what to do with.
We were building connections.
We have a friend that's like, oh, I work for HGTV. You should apply to have them redo your house. And we're like, yeah, that's never going to happen. So we're trying to start the renovations on the house ourselves, but we don't know what we're doing, and we're messing everything up. And we get a phone call, and they're like, stop all changes on your house. We've chosen you.
Chosen. At the time, this word describes how Cole saw himself. Except Cole used other words like special, connected, and even famous. And it's justified. Think about it. A good-looking guy married to a rock star wife, fostering kids, growing a creative business, and leading in his church. Cole and Ashley were crushing it. If I would have known them in Durham, I would have crowned them in my mind as a Christian power couple. Their superhuman efficiency and messianic levels of productivity would have baffled me, and with a sense of awe and maybe even reverence, I would have wondered the same thing I've wondered about other power couples. How do they do it all? And just like many other moments in my life, I would have been sorely disappointed by the answer.
At that time, we were in counseling trying to unpack why she and I were so anxious all the time.
The problem was we were saying yes to everything.
We were saying yes to everything.
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 Cole had found his orbit. He had found where he fit. And I just kind of was serving in a non-vocational way at our church. But there came a point where I kind of asked our church, like, hey, I'm doing a lot of this. Like, you're either going to need to pay me or I'm going to have to find another job because I can't be giving 20 and 30 hours a week to this. They weren't able to hire me at the time. And so I stepped away from that. And I still had to learn, like, how do I use these writing gifts? And how do I use my theological love? How do I use my teaching ability? And was I using them for all the wrong reasons? Was I doing them just because I thought the church like needed me and God needed me? Like I was wrestling through all those big questions and I didn't have a fit. And I went through probably 4 different job opportunities that all felt like a right fit. And right at the end of almost getting it, like something eerie, something weird would happen like right before where it just fell through. And it just felt like God was being cruel. It felt like, what in the world? Why are you like dangling the carrot?
Ashley is wired like your doctorate, professor, teacher, preacher, writing books and high-level academic theology. She's like an absolute genius. She doesn't want to be a pastor. She's like heavy lies that crown, but she does want to teach women and she wants to teach them the Bible. But there just wasn't a ton of opportunity in Durham at the time.
While Ashley was wondering why God would be so cruel, and Cole was thinking Durham just didn't have many opportunities for her, they both continued to pray for something to open up.
Ashley had been put up for a couple positions and didn't get them. And it was just hard watching her break. So I was praying like, Lord, give her an opportunity that she gets to say yes to and that you're calling her to. And in 2017, that came when B&H Publishing hired her at Lifeway. So it was a clear yes for me. And I was like beating Ashley to that punch where I was like, the Lord is calling us to Nashville. That means saying goodbye to everything that we know in Durham.
From what I can tell, Cole genuinely believes his wife is an absolute genius, and he's laying down his career and community for her job opportunity. He definitely is in the running for Husband of the Year, but Ashley also realizes how much each of them, especially Cole, is giving up to move to Nashville.
While I am sort of finding my fit, if you will, a lot is being pulled out from under us at the same time. That second foster child I mentioned, she had been with us a year and she was on her way to being reunited with her biological family. So we were saying goodbye to her. Being known in our community, we didn't realize how much we were resting on that, but like just having some sort of name and esteem among a group of people like was being pulled out from under us. Nobody in Nashville cares or knows who we are. And a lot of my work too is shadow work. I'm not really like, the work that I do isn't typically seen. And so even though it's a cool job, it's not like it's a front-facing job. People don't really care who I am. And so Cole is going through the loss of our foster daughter. He's going through the loss of his place of esteem you have in a Christian community where you're doing all the ministry stuff and people look up to you. Like that's not something he's carrying with him into Nashville, nor am I. And also just work, like he had become well-known and his craft, all of that's going away.
So we came, we made the leap, we came. And when we got here, things got weird. Things got so weird.
We find this Airbnb couple who's like willing to give us month to month and we're like living in their basement. I'm 20 weeks pregnant at the time. So like 20 weeks pregnant, new job, new city, nobody living in this basement apartment.
We didn't have a church. Nobody knew us. I didn't have a job or even a path forward. But Ashley had this very well-established position with a bunch of well-established people. So our roles kind of changed where she was going out to dinner most nights with authors and other editors and her colleagues. And I was like alone. And I just felt this increasing presence of the Lord being like, something's not right. Like you feel a vacuum. When you're here and you're in this position and you're called to serve in the shadows, how does that make you feel? Like what's going on in your heart?
Cole was too young at the time to have a midlife crisis, but he definitely experienced an identity crisis. And this time, he didn't have a group of men or friends in the area to help him process it.
I admitted myself into counseling. I was like, I need help unpacking this. This is some deep stuff. You almost feel like there's this well and there's some junk at the bottom of the well, but your arm is just too short to reach it. You need somebody to hold your legs to get down there.
It was a soul searching season for him because he had to wrestle with, was I doing all those things before just to have a name? Was it like the Tower of Babel where it's like I'm building something important, but it's because I want to have a name for myself?
All this is happening simultaneously. Ashley's working. Charlie was born. I'm stay-at-home dad. I would change clothes 3 times a day because Charlie would spit up on him all the time. changing poopy diapers with no one there to like see you or root you on or be like, hey, good job.
He was learning, what does it mean to go low so that I can come up underneath somebody and elevate them and exalt them?
So at the end of 2018, Ashley and I are talking, and at the end of every year, we have this practice in our home. We don't think about New Year's resolutions. We kind of think about banner words or things that we can co-labor with the Lord on what he wants to do in our hearts, like character building. New Year's resolutions for me have always ended in shame and just guilt of like, eat better, lose weight, spend less time on social media, and I fail at everything. And then I'm like, well, why even bother? You know, a couple of years ago, we started thinking about like, Lord, what do you want for me this year? What do you want for my heart, for my character, for who I am? And we pray through a couple of things and kind of spend a couple of days at the beginning of January thinking through that next year. Well, 2019, I'm doing this and I sense the Lord again, like that very audible, but you don't hear it with your ears kind of question. He says, Cole, do you think more about what you want to do in 10 years or who you want to be in 20? And it just shook me because I'm doing all this deep heart work and counseling, and I kept praying, God, give me what my calling is or my purpose is here in Nashville. What do you want me to do? What's my next job? Because I just felt aimless. And he brought me to the life of Paul, ironically. He was like, Paul was a couple different identities, social identities in his tenure. He was a religious powerhouse. He was a zealot, a religious teacher. And then he was a missionary. He was shipwrecked. He was a prisoner. He was a tent maker. There were so many things in his life that he could have written on a business card and handed it to somebody. But once he had that transformation, he didn't care about what that identity was. He had one purpose, and that was to make disciples. So I really started praying like, Lord, what is it that you want of my life? And I had this picture of an old dude, white hair, and he was mopping floors. You looked at this man and you knew he was joyful in all circumstances. He was a nobody in terms of the business card, but the man knew Jesus. I was like, that's the man I want to be. I want to be joyful in all circumstances. As soon as I said it, I was like, oh crap. Ashley comes home and I was like, babe, I almost applied for a janitor job.
And I was like, what?
And she's like, honey, we got to talk. Like, are you sure about this? She was like, she wasn't hearing the same thing that I was. She was like, Cole, can you break this down for me? Like, do you really want to go be a janitor? She was not sure that I was hearing properly.
I was like, you have more than proved you're okay with a low position. You literally moved our entire family so that you could put my opportunities ahead of your own. But he came to me and was like, I know I did the right thing, but internally there is a war. I'm mad. I'm frustrated. I feel not enough and I feel ashamed and like all these things that I shouldn't feel in Christ. And so the way to combat the draw to go high, the antidote to that is to go low. And he was like, we all agree with that in theory, but I think I actually need to do it.
So instead of theorizing about how to go low or what it might look like in a perfect world, Cole takes action.
He was looking for janitor jobs online, which still blows my mind when I say it. And he's like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. And he finds one at my publishing house and it's like a facilities person job. And he doesn't get it. He can't get that job. He can't get the janitor job.
I finally realized that this job, it's in like, I don't know, Michigan or somewhere else. It was in like an entirely different state. It wasn't in Nashville. But at that point I was like, I want to go low. I want to choose a job, a profession where I am in a place of service in the shadows. That's where I want to be.
Cole's first attempt at going low didn't succeed. But after a couple weeks, he landed a job in a co-working space. Not as a janitor really, but close.
I don't want to call it a janitor position, but it was like an office admin. Somebody to like put out snacks, make coffee, restock the printer paper, clean up. And I was like, yeah, like this is it. This is the one. And it was only 3 days a week. So it let me still stay home 2 days with Charlie. And it was perfect. So I took the job. I still remember the first day on the job, I was like, all right, let's go to work. Like I'm ready to rock and roll. Let's do this. My superior, sweet woman, she taught me the rounds, the ropes. And then at the end, she was like, listen, I really need help with the IT closet and I need someone to organize it. Here's the closet. Do what you can do. Try to make sense of it. Have you ever seen Friends, like Monica's hidden closet? That's what this thing looked like. And I was like, my goodness, my first day on the job. And the Lord has me literally in the shadows in a closet. So I put on some worship music and I just went to town, and the Lord was there. Like, I felt his presence be like, yes, like now you're getting it. You are not defined by what you do. You are defined by who you are and who I say you are.
I just was skeptical, like wrestling with the Lord privately. You've given me this great fit for me, but what are you doing with him? He doesn't deserve that. He's choosing the humble road. Why would you push him further down?
As Ashley questioned God, Cole made coffee and cleaned up in the co-working space. And after a week or two, he noticed a group of people in the co-working space doing what he calls really cool work.
They were working with like Chris Tomlin and Toby Mac and Building 429, Unspoken, a couple other really fun bands. So they were an agency geared towards CCM music.
Cole was serving coffee and cleaning up messes for people who he deemed to be cool. Not only were they cool, but they were making content for bands in the contemporary Christian music industry, bands that Cole had listened to. But instead of trying to promote himself or network with this group of really cool people doing really cool work, Cole continued to make coffee and clean up in the shadows.
Fast forward a couple weeks, I'm getting to know the lay of the land. I started realizing that there was a wave of people that would come in before 8 o'clock to get an earlier jump on the day. So I was like, you know what? They need coffee too. I was like, why don't I start coming in a little bit earlier?
Cole was an admin / coffee gopher / borderline janitor at a co-working space. He wasn't seeking a promotion and he wasn't incentivized by tips, but he treated his job like a teenage Chick-fil-A worker who dreams of one day being a Chick-fil-A owner. He made it to work early just to make sure everyone had coffee when they arrived. Back to Cole.
There was a man there who would come in early just because he had 4 kids and he wanted to get home before traffic in order to spend more time with them. So he would make his rounds, and he introduced himself as Richard. And I was like, Richard, what do you do? He's like, well, I work at the agency back here, the marketing agency. I was like, oh, cool. You ever have those people that you meet and you just start talking to them and you know that they love Jesus? They know and love Jesus. And that was Richard. Like, just joy, compassion, kindness exuded this man in a supernatural way. I just sensed the peace of God on it. And I finally looked at him. I said, do you love Jesus? Like, I feel like you love Jesus. He was like, yeah. Do you? I feel like you do too. So an immediate friendship was born. It was like another week or two after that. He was like, so what's your deal? What's your experience? What's your past? What brought you to Nashville? So he kind of was asking, like, do you want to work here forever? I responded as vaguely as I could. I was like, well, I did some photography back in Durham and I worked a little bit in advertising. And he was like, do you have a portfolio?
To most creatives in that position, Richard's question would have seemed like a potential godsend. But Cole was a little bit more hesitant. Here's Richard to explain.
I wouldn't say Cole was overly anxious to show me the work. I don't know if he thought maybe I wasn't serious or what, but I asked him a couple times to send me your stuff. I want to see it. I'd love to see your stuff.
I didn't want to do it because I didn't want to grab for my identity in that.
Cole, if he feels a conviction, he's the dog on a bone about it. He's like, the Lord can ask me up. If he wants to let me re-enter the space of creativity with a purer heart, then he can bring me back into it.
It took a little bit of prompting and he finally sent it over. I mean, immediately I just thought, he's got an incredible eye. He had some images that were just stunning. Working at an agency and working with other creatives, you just kind of can tell right away. It's almost like that thing that you hear from coaches when they hear a baseball player hit a ball and they're like, they can just tell by the way the ball sounds off the bat if they have a good swing and all of that. That was what it felt like when I saw his portfolio. I was like, oh man, this guy's just got a great swing.
He saw my portfolio and he approached the owner of the agency and said like, hey, I think we need to meet with this guy.
I was like, I know we don't have a position, but we just got to get this guy in here. And so we finally arranged a meeting, and the CEO also loved his work.
They offered me one day a week at being like an art director, doing photography and design at that agency.
That quickly became, let's have you here as much as we can, which was full time.
Richard and I grew deeper and deeper in our friendship. I love that guy. I would follow him anywhere. As we continued to build a relationship, the Lord called him out of that agency to start his own thing.
I remember him saying, I really don't want you to go, but if that's where you're supposed to be, I'm for you. And I want that Then not long after that, he was like,
If you go, you better take me with you.
which I absolutely loved. I didn't think that was going to be possible very quickly, but thankfully we got more client work right away. And I was able to invite Cole in to be a partner within 4 months.
Fast forward a month or two, the Lord made it possible for an agency to be born.
And I think 6 months is when we signed on the dotted line.
Cole no longer works as an office admin / coffee gopher in a co-working space. He now co-owns the FIFO agency with Richard. They serve many clients from contemporary Christian music artists to lawyers to bourbon companies. I talked with Corey Henkel of Centricity Music about how clients experience Cole.
He's a tall guy, long flowing hair with cameras hanging off of him. Like it's like some sort of photographer jungle man. And it was like, who is this guy? And then you see the images he captures and it's like, oh, wow. I mean, really a beautiful eye and captures really incredible images. Artists appreciate what FIFO, what Cole does. The multiple artists that we've used with them, when the next project comes up, like, oh, we're going to use FIFO. And they're like, oh yeah, great. And the fact that they've been able to build that as quickly as they have is just testament to the fact that they're professionals, but also just good dudes.
Let's be honest, Cole has always been pretty likable and very creative. From his college days of painting beer pong tables until now, people enjoyed him and his art. But after first giving up his party boy lifestyle, then later his career and his status in Durham, Cole has changed. And maybe the best way to know how he's changed is to see how his art has changed.
Now, looking at his art, it is just so honoring of people. His literal art has changed. Like what flows out of him has changed.
The fear of man does not have him by the throat anymore. It makes him a better dad. It makes him a better husband. It makes him a better worker. The jaw-dropping part of the story is the answer to the question that Cole was asked in the beginning. Who do you want to be on the other side? The person he is a free person.
In response to God, Cole gave up his city, his community, and his business to serve his wife. He gave up his professional status to serve God and strangers. And now he co-owns a business doing what he loves. It might be tempting to use his story as a simple self-help prescription for success. But in actually living this story, Cole found something different.
It took the fear out of losing a job. If our agency goes up in flames somehow, there's that sense of security that I now have that the Lord really does care about me and he's going to take care of me. And I don't need to worry. I can be just as happy, feel just as fulfilled in any position. I look at the Lord and I'm like, all right, you got the keys to whatever you want me to do for the rest of my life. If I'm going to be a janitor, I'm going to be a janitor. I'm going to do it with a smile on my face because I know who you are and what you've called me to. I'm going to make disciples. I'm going to impact others for the gospel. I'm going to build your kingdom in whatever season and situation you have me in. That's it.
Thanks for listening. If you like this story, hit follow or subscribe now. Also, please give our show a 5-star review on your favorite podcast app. Doing so will help other people find it. And if you've heard a true story or have a true story you want to share with me, go to godoutloud.com now and easily record your story. I'll listen to it, promise. The theme song is written by me, Rob Vischer, and produced by my arch pickleball nemesis, Joe Fry. Thanks to Cole Gorman, Ashley Gorman, Richard Jackson, Zach Taylor, and Corey Henkel for your time and interviews. If you love this show, show us some love by texting this episode's link to your friends. Thanks again for listening to If you want to hear another season of stories of people who claim they heard God, go to godoutloud.com/donate. It takes a lot of time to produce these podcasts, about 1.5 to 2 work weeks, 60 to 80 hours. That's 288,000 plus a few seconds, 4,800 minutes at least. It takes a lot of time to make this podcast. My wife won't let me make it if we can't eat. Anyway, we're raising $20,000 to start making season 3. Once we hit that goal, we'll start tracking down stories, interviewing guests, and making another season of 10 episodes. But in the meantime, we have another 6 episodes of season 2 for your listening pleasure. Thanks again for listening.
By the way, if any stay-at-home moms are out there listening, you have the hardest job in the world. Hands down, without a doubt. If anyone tries to tell you otherwise, they are liars. Whether you're a dad, whether you're a mom, stay-at-home parents, without a doubt, the highest calling and the hardest job. Just kudos to you. Well done.
Hey there, I'm Paul Hastings, the host of Compelled. And just like the podcast that you just finished listening to, my show is part of the Proclaim Podcast Network. On every episode of Compelled, we use gripping, immersive storytelling to bring Christian testimonies to life. One of my favorite stories is episode 31 with Virginia Prodan. Virginia was a small, petite attorney in communist Romania during the 1980s, defending Christians in court. Her success angered the Romanian dictator, and he vowed that she would pay. One evening, Virginia was alone at her office when a man entered the room, closed the door, and pulled out a gun. He barked, "Shut up, sit down, I'm here to kill you." Virginia was face to face with a trained assassin. What happened next? Well, there's only one way to find out. Virginia's entire story is episode 31, entitled "He Came to Kill Me." Just search for Compelled on your podcast app or visit compelledpodcast.com. Again, that's compelledpodcast.com.